Donald Trump is still struggling with how he's going to pay the $454 million bond for the New York fraud trial verdict. But before he can figure out that problem, he's only got 4 days left to figure out an even bigger problem. And that is, how is he going to come up with the $83 million that he owes E. Jean Carroll by this weekend? Yes, Donald Trump only has 4 days left to put up that $83 million, or else, according to MSNBC legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Joyce Vance, E. Jean Carroll's lawyers can begin the process of seizing his assets as early as next week. Here is what Vance wrote on her Substack over the weekend. Trump has to post a bond in the E. Jean Carroll case by next weekend, so we're now 4 days away, or Carroll can begin to collect on her $83.3 million judgment against him. This is commonly referred to as an appeal bond. If Trump manages to either get a bond or pay the full amount of the judgment into a court account, then Carroll cannot begin efforts to collect it while the appeal is pending. If he fails to do so, her lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, can get to work. Which means by this time next week, if Donald Trump has not put up that $83.3 million, Roberta Kaplan, on behalf of E. Jean Carroll, can go to the courts and say, okay, he's missed the deadline. We now have no option because he didn't give us the money, and that's only, again, if he doesn't give the money. We're going to have to seize his assets. Now, based on his own valuation, this property's worth this one's worth this one's worth this. These would suffice to come up with the $83 million that he owes my client. Judge, do you agree? That, at this point, is the logical next step because Donald Trump has not put up the $83.3 million. And by the way, if he does not come up with that money by this deadline, he likely will not even be able to appeal this ruling. So he's going to come up with something, right? I firmly believe that we're not going to get to the point with this particular case where his assets get seized. But there's another problem he has. Because according to Donald Trump, right, this is what he said in previous deposition, he's got about $400 million cash on hand in the bank. But he owes $454 million for the New York fraud trial verdict, so he already can't pay that. And if he has to take $83 million out of that $400 million pot, he's left with $317 million, which of course at that point, let me do quick math in my head, leaves him $137 million short for the New York fraud ruling. So how does he come up with $137 million if he pays the $83 million to E. Jean Carroll? There's a lot of numbers out there. There's a lot of valuations, and none of them add up for Donald Trump. If he wants to appeal these cases, he's got to have the money. And here's something else that's interesting. This is something I learned over the weekend. If Donald Trump does decide, and if the court allows him to, because sometimes they don't allow you to do this, to put up his property as collateral. So here's an example. Rather than forfeiting the property and allowing the state to seize it, what he can do is say, okay, well, I'm going to put this property up as collateral, right? Trump Tower in New York, I'm giving you the deed to this for now, pending the appeal. If I lose, you get the building. If I win, I keep my property. The court actually can and frequently does, when collateral is put up instead of cash, they can require double the amount of collateral. So if he owes E. Jean Carroll $83 million, he can't just put up an $83 million property. He would typically have to put up properties totaling about $160 million because the court would have to liquidate them very quickly, which means they would have to sell them below value. So yeah, Trump would have to put up even more property than cash if it comes down to it. And based on the fact that that clock is running, probably looks like that's going to end up being the case in both of these cases.